Our top story. The UK-based Centre for Economics and Business Research has come out with its annual World Economic League table. It has made economic forecasts up to the year 2037, and the report signals very good news for India in the years ahead. It says India now seems unstoppable in its momentum to become the third economic superpower in the world. The think tank predicts that India will have overtaken Germany as the world's fourth largest economy by 2027, that India will overtake Japan to occupy the third spot by 2032, and that India will be a $10 trillion economy by 2035. In last year's report, India was expected to overtake Japan by 2031. The think tank has had to revise its predictions because of the war in Ukraine. Now, India's GDP is expected to grow at an average of 6.4% per year for the next 5 years. In the 9 years after that, India's GDP is expected to grow at an average of 6.5%, while India is still predicted to become the world's third largest economy in the next decade. In 2022, India is still classified as a lower middle income country. This is due to its per capita GDP of less than $8,300. The report states that India will only become the world's third economic superpower in the second half of this century. Now, the United States and China are predicted to remain above India for the foreseeable future, but revisions have been made to predictions about China as well. Earlier, the CEBR had said it was almost inevitable that China would surpass the United States. China's population is over 4 times the size of the US population. Once its per capita GDP becomes even a quarter of that of the US, China will have overtaken the United States. But slow growth, a shrinking labor force, the collapse of property firms and the zero-COVID policy-induced lockdowns have pushed the timeline for China to become the largest economy in the world. Now, the think tank says it may not happen until 2036. But there is a caveat. This is a scenario where China does not use force to take control of Taiwan. However, if Beijing does go ahead and invade and capture the self-governed island, the resultant war and sanctions may prevent China from ever overtaking the US. To discuss these fascinating forecasts, we are now joined by Nilesh Shah, Managing Director at Kotak Mahindra Asset Management. Mr. Shah, thanks so much for joining us here on WION. Now, this UK-based think tank has made some very encouraging predictions for the Indian economy. According to them, India will have overtaken Germany as the world's fourth largest economy by 2027. It's likely to overtake Japan to become the third largest economy, behind only the US and China, by 2032. And India will be a $10 trillion economy by 2035. Now, this seems to surpass the most optimistic of projections that have been made so far. How realistic do you really believe these predictions are, especially given our current growth rate?
So, thank you for inviting me over here. I believe if 140 crore Indians work together, then definitely all these projections are achievable. Today also, we do see many people on the street expecting India to become third largest economy by 2030. Now, whether we do it in 2030 or 2032, one thing we should keep in mind is not to become complacent. A case in point is Brazilian GDP. It was 2.62 trillion in 2011, and 10 years down the line, it is 40% lower at about 1.6 trillion. We should not become complacent. We should continue to build on the hard work which we have done in 3 decades, and then all these projections and predictions can be achieved.
You know, Nilesh, I'm glad you pointed out the dichotomy that exists on the ground, the many Indias within India that we have to acknowledge. On a sobering note, we have to take into account the present realities. India is still classified as a lower middle income country because its per capita GDP is less than $8,300. And I'm playing the devil's advocate here. The question is, do we adopt the right barometers and benchmarks to calculate economic growth and projections for the future? At the end of the day, isn't the most important yardstick the quality of life of the average Indian citizen?
Undoubtedly, we have to look at quality of life of every Indian and not just average Indian citizen. But what do we do? From 1947 till 1990, we focused on dividing the cake equally among the recipient. In the process, everyone kept on getting smaller and smaller pieces as the size of expand. From 1990 onwards, we started changing our track and we focused on expanding the size of the cake. And even if some people got disproportionately higher share, at least the last recipient got a far bigger piece than pre-1990. Clearly, India has to follow economic policies which creates accelerated growth. From 1990 till today, India has grown its GDP by almost 10 times, from 300 billion to 3 trillion plus. Our market share in global GDP has also expanded in that period. So that there's, despite unequal distribution, the last person still end up getting bigger piece. I think we should go for growth over inequality.
And also very quickly, Nilesha, before we let you go, let's look at the forecast about China overtaking the US as the largest economy in the world. Do you believe China is on course to achieving that target, or have the COVID pandemic and China's zero COVID policy thrown a major spanner in the works?
Undoubtedly, the path of China is delayed a little bit because of their COVID policies and also because of the real estate sector. As this think tank itself mentioned, instead of 2028, the target is now postponed to 2036. So clearly, China is a little bit delayed in overtaking US as the largest economy of the world.
All right, a delay, yes, but it is something that is very likely to happen in the years ahead, unless, of course, China decides to capture Taiwan by force, because then all bets really are off. But talking about the Indian economy, yes, you're saying that there is no room for complacency, but certainly good to know that you are bullish on the Indian economy and you seem to think that these projections are certainly realistic and achievable. On that note, Nilesha, thank you so much for speaking to WION.